Welcome to the Planning Committee for the January 2024. Happy New Year to everybody. Nice to see you all at the back. We've got quite a varied agenda today, and in view of the public speaking, I'll be taking all of the public speaking items first. I'm Councillor Phil Murphy, I'm Chair of the committee, and Dale?
I'm Councillor Dale Rook and I'm the Vice Chair of the Planning Committee.
Good afternoon all, Craig O'Connor, Head of Planning.
Philip Thomas, Development Services Manager.
Amy Longford, Development Management Area Manager.
Paige Mosley, Solicitor to Planning Committee.
Anna Hawker, Trainee Solicitor.
Richard Williams, Democratic Services.
Thank you, everybody. We go to the agenda now, and apologies for absence, Richard.
Yes, Chair, apologies from Councillors Bond, Bromfield, Chandler, and Councillor Eason will be late.
Thank you. Declarations of interest. Do I have any declarations of interest from the floor? I have to absent myself from the first item today, which is on your list as 4.3, application DM 2023-01042, for the same reasons as last time, in that an allocation has been made which suggests that I don't have an open mind. And Councillor Rook will be, as Vice Chair, will be chairing that particular item. Can I remind everybody online
Chair.
to...
Sorry, I just need to make you aware that whilst I was the Cabinet member with responsibility for housing, I took through the report through Cabinet on item 4.2. I believe I have an open mind with regard to the actual application, but I will take your advice as to what I should do.
Page.
I think if you're comfortable, you've got an open mind, you can declare the interest, but remain for the debate.
Thank you for that. Can I remind everybody online to keep your cameras on, otherwise we won't be able to allow you to vote. And can you, if you want to put your hand up, can you make sure you do it in the chat so we can see you, and we'll be able to progress along those lines. As I said earlier, we'll be changing the order of the agenda, and the first one that we'll be looking at will be item 4.3, which, as I said, is DM 2023-01042. I shall now leave the room and ask Councillor Rook to take over. Sorry, I skipped the minutes at the last meeting. Can I have a proposal that we accept them? Thank you, Councillor Pell. Councillor McConnell. Okay, thanks a lot. Over to you, Dave.
Thank you, Chair. I'll just give you a few moments to vacate the chamber. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, members of the committee, we're looking at this application. Application is returning to committee to be determined as members seem minded to go against officer recommendations at the October meeting. And as per the Planning Code of Practice, it is returned with reasons for refusal. Public speaking would normally only be permitted on one occasion where applications are considered by the Planning Committee. However, the Chair has discretion to allow further speaking in special circumstances where this can be justified. In light of the additional information that has been submitted by the applicant since the October committee, further public speaking has been allowed Members will be aware that this application has already been debated in some detail at the October meeting. So bearing that in mind, committee members, we'll now move to the officer to present the case. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So this is application DM 2023-01042. It's the change of use from agriculture to land for the keeping of horses, proposed erection of a stable block for 5 horses, erection of ancillary storage building, construction of a menage at land northwest of Holly Lodge Road, Dewstow Road, 5 Lanes, Cowent. This application was brought before committee following members deciding not to agree on a motion to approve the application at the meeting on the Tuesday, the 3rd of October. Therefore, in accordance with the Planning Code of Practice, February 2023, the application was deferred for reasons for refusal to be considered based on a discussion within that meeting. If we can just go to the slides, thank you, Phil. The first slide shows the red line boundary of the site to the north of the minor road. The next slide shows the existing site as it is, and the next slide is the proposed position of the stables, barn and menage, together with the access and landscaping with reinstated hedges. The next slide shows the drainage destination and the menage surfacing details. And the last slides show the elevation details of the stables and the barn. Here, the next slides show the photographs of the existing site where members visited prior to the meeting on the 3rd of October 2023. The application is presented again to members with reasons for refusals identified at the top of the officer's report. These are based on the conversation had by members in the meeting of the 3rd of October. However, I must draw members' attention to the reason 3 of the officer's report that refers to the potential detrimental impact on the biodiversity of the site. It is clear within the officer's report that members' professional ecological advisor has not raised any concerns over the development, and therefore this reason is considered to be contrary to the professional advice and not justified. This could potentially result in a local authority being awarded costs if the application was considered by an independent inspector at appeal. It is therefore officer's recommendation that should members wish to refuse the application, that only reasons 1 and 2 should be used. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Amy. We have public speakers. Councillor Mike John was due to speak, but he hasn't arrived yet. So we'll move on to Roger Vasey. Thank you.
Thank you. Today, committee, you're asked to consider reasons for refusal, compiled by those offered by Councillors Bond, Bryn and McKenna. The reasons appear robust, accurately reflecting the views stated, and it would seem a simple matter to accept these. However, there appears to be an initiative to reopen the debate on the merits of the application. May I remind members, the option to defer for further information was not the motion voted upon, this being reiterated by the Chairman during the vote. The motion moved to accept the case officer's recommendation for approval. That motion not being carried is covered by the Code of Practice, as described by the officer. Nowhere does the Code of Practice allow for further debate or a change in such a vote. I and others have sought clarity of Section 12 and on 3 separate occasions have been offered unsatisfactory interpretation that seemingly enables the reopening of the debate and again taking a vote. This would appear both undemocratic and contrary to your published Code of Practice in its disregard for the vote already taken. I believe it's of the utmost importance that members are fully aware of the relevance of Section 12. And if in doubt, I suggest you invite legal services to provide clarity on this point before embarking upon further debate of the application. I have furnished the Chairman with this question on the assumption that clarity would be desired. However, should committee choose to further debate the application, may I draw attention to aspects of the officer's report. A drainage plan is now supplied. However, there is an illegal septic tank installed on site. Yes, it is under enforcement, but committee, this has now been appealed, and all other illegal items remain on site. It's clear the applicant is intent on the tank remaining. Where is the existence of the septic? Why is it being hidden from scrutiny by the committee and is absent from the drainage plan? The applicant has again declined to provide a lighting plan, likely intending to make use of the illegal lights already installed, often on all night. At this time, the proposed condition for lighting is already compromised, as are the requirements of the ecology report. We now finally have sight of that ecology report. However, we are professionally advised it is inadequate. It's largely desk-based, lacking in scope and not adequately addressing the adjacent site of interest for Nature Conservancy. We note bat boxes are installed at the entrance above a motion detector security light, which illuminates frequently. This shows an alarming lack of understanding for the nocturnal needs of bats. Questions I posed at the last meeting remain unanswered. I've lodged them with the chairman in the hope that answers will be forthcoming today. Finally, the petition mentioned in the report represents 25 nearby households, many raising objections and contributing financially to professional advice we have obtained. On policy grounds, this application cannot be approved. Our conviction on this will ease any decision we take to legally challenge an approval. I respectfully ask that committee members become equally conversant with all facts and policy implications before considering any motion to approve. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Vasey. We have a speaker for the applicant, who's Shannon Connolly. Thank you.
Thank you. Firstly, I'd like to introduce myself. My name is Shannon Connolly. I am the owner of the land northwest of Holly Lodge. I would like to apologise in regards to the work that has already been carried out, and I would like to ensure you that we are working with the MCC to rectify the issues. No other work has been carried out since the first enforcement was issued in July 2022, and I would like to touch on some of the concerns which have been highlighted. There is a mention about overdevelopment and incorrect use of the land. We are asking for 5 stables on over 5 acres of land. As we have made everyone aware on several occasions, 3 of our horses suffered and continue to be at risk of laminitis and need to be kept on restrictive grazing, as do our 2 donkeys. Because of this, we need to supply a good amount of hay to ensure they have enough to eat. In regards to the incorrect use of the land, this is something which I cannot understand. Horses belong in the open countryside. As you would have seen during your visit on the 2nd of October 2023, all of the land is lined with horses and stables, including a well-known racing yard. So I ask, why am I being treated differently to everyone else on the lane? In regards to the traffic, I've owned the land for nearly 3 years. In that time, there has been no incidents regarding traffic on this lane. The planning before you is for personal use, so traffic will not increase. So why am I being told that the level of traffic will increase? In regards to the ecological report, your council's ecologist has approved the plans with no issues or objections. So why am I being questioned? So why is this being questioned? We are asking for our stables to be built out of blockwork with wooden cladding. This will match our neighbouring stables. Most of the stables on the lane are built out of blockwork and rendered, one of which had a toilet and a cesspit fitted in 2021, to which this was passed with no issues. I have been questioned in regards to the size of my riding arena, claiming this is of Olympic size, yet a yard next to me has extended our arena from 20 by 40 to 20 by 60. There was no objections and this was never questioned. I cannot help but feel this is personal against me and my family, as false allegations are still being made, i.e. we've had stone delivered, additional lights have been added since August 2023. I feel the allegations have has been put in place to make sure a negative view is portrayed to the committee of us. We have supplied all the additional information you have requested. All I'm asking for is to be treated the same as everyone else on the lane, and I hope today we can finally get a positive outcome and I can bring my horses back together. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I believe Councillor John Frequent, Community Council, is now in the chamber. If he wishes to speak, now's his opportunity.
Thank you, Chair. I'm sorry I was late. This planning application continues to concern Cowent Community Council. It will come to no surprise to any of you that the Community Council continues to be opposed to this application. Since your committee last discussed it, we've not heard or read anything that leads us to a position where we might change our mind. For that reason, I do not intend to take much of your time this afternoon. Everything that we have said before still remains relevant to this application. And in fact, having read and discussed some of the more recent documentation placed in the public domain, our advice to you remains the same. Refuse this application. We note that the conditions applied to this application, should it be approved, have been amended. We believe that the granting of planning applications with a long string of conditions attached not only suggests that there might be something wrong with the initial application, but also places the County Council in the difficult position of having to police and enforce those conditions. We're not certain that the County Council will be able to fulfil that process effectively. Indeed, we wonder whether systems actually exist to fulfil that process. We've noted the proposed waste management strategy dated the 25th of October 23. We also note that MCC Environmental Health are of the opinion that it provides sufficient detail to demonstrate how waste will be managed at the proposed development. We're not experts, but Cowent Community Council disagrees. We note that MCC Environmental Health recommends that the draft condition includes reference and compliance with DEFRA's codes of good agricultural practice. I'm no expert, but even a casual reading of those codes of practice suggests that the waste management plan as submitted does not comply with those codes of practice. We find it difficult to understand how the plan as submitted can be approved. In passing, it should be noted that Cowent Community Council have concerns about the animal waste already created by the animals stabled on this field. We believe that it's not currently being stored or disposed of appropriately. Finally, Cowent Community Council has to remind you of the enforcement notice placed on parts of this site, not covered by this planning application. It's the elephant in this room. You, I am sure, will remember your meeting of the 7th of November, where you received and noted the planning annual performance report. This is not the place to discuss that report, but you should all be thinking about it. The report shows that Monmouthshire's planning service continues to perform effectively, with just one of the 13 indicators in need of improvement against the Welsh Government's targets. Enforcement notices placed on a large area of this site came into place on the 31st of October 2023. Mindful that this application refers to a different area of this site, but only just, Cowent Community Council are wondering how that process is going. I also hear that additional enforcement notice has been placed on this site in relation to nighttime lighting. We're wondering whether any of that enforcement notice might have relevance to this application. And that, of course, is another matter that the Council believes can be controlled by condition.
Councillor John, I need to inform you you're getting close to your 4 minutes. If you wish to use your summing up period of 2 minutes, that's up to you.
I have one more sentence.
Thank you.
Thank you. I have one more sentence. Cowent Community Council continues to recommend that you refuse this application. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Just open it up to members now. Councillor Crook has his hand up. Councillor Crook.
Thank you, Chair. We've debated this application in some length in the last planning application, and I've heard nothing to the contrary that would persuade me to look at this application. So I would propose that we stick to the original decision of the officers and refuse this application.
Yeah, thank you very much, Councillor Crook. That's the reason why we're here, is to look at the conditions that we're granting refusal for this application. So I agree with you there. If there's no other comments from members, no other points that they wish to raise, then if you're quite happy, can we look at those conditions and confirm whether you're happy or not with those conditions? Looks like nobody else is wishing to speak. We need to approve the reasons. If we're happy with the reasons given for refusal, are we content to go to a vote? Do we need to elaborate on any of those points? And John has suggested that we move to consider the options. Do we have a seconder for that?
Sue has a hand up.
Sorry, Sue McConnell.
Thank you. Sorry, excuse me. Thank you, Chair. Are we going to discuss the those conditions or reasons individually? I think we.
Can we clarify the conditions?
We need to clarify the conditions. I think we were advised that one of them, it doesn't hold water, basically. So I just want to make sure that we remove that from.
Yeah, officer recommendation is that if members are minded to go forward with refusal, that only reasons 1 and 2 are used and not the third, but that is up to members to make that decision.
If members concur with the with that option, then I personally do. Can we move to a vote to look at those applying those 2 conditions only to the refusal?
Chair, just to clarify, they are reasons for refusal rather than conditions, just so that the terminology is correct.
Yes, of course. Yes,
Thank
of
you,
course.
Chair.
Sorry.
Thank you, Chair.
Okay, then we'll move to a vote, excluding the one reason for refusal, item 3, I think it is.
Sarah has a hand up.
Sorry, well spotted. Thank you. Sarah, sorry.
Apologies, Chair. Can I just ask for some clarification of the committee's options here?
The options are that we include the 3 reasons, including the ecological one, which doesn't seem to hold water, or remove that option and just go with the other 2. Does that make sense, Councillor Birch?
Thank you. Yes, it does. So at this point, there is no option to reconsider that refusal. That decision was taken at the previous meeting.
That's correct. We refuse it.
No, sorry to interject. No, so at the previous meeting, the motion to approve wasn't carried. So there is an ability to move a motion to approve now if that was what members wanted. But obviously the discussion is at the moment on that motion to refuse and the conditions.
In that case, should we be looking at a vote to refuse or approve the application before we look at the conditions?
Yeah, I think you need a first and seconder for whatever motion is being proposed. Obviously, Councillor Crook had suggested a motion to refuse. Obviously, discussion has now been had about the conditions and that there will be in two. So I suppose if Councillor Crook is still happy with that motion with those two conditions, we need a seconder. Reasons. Sorry, yeah, reasons. Then we can go to the vote.
Okay, Councillor Crook suggested that we continue with the refusal with those two options included. Two reasons for refusal included. Is there a seconder for that option?
I'll second that.
Thank you very much, Councillor Bryn. In that case, we'll move to a vote on refusing this application with the two reasons as outlined by the officer. And if you'd like to cast your vote now.
Okay, so that is refused. 11 for refusal, 1 against.
Thank you very much. If somebody would like to invite the chair back in. Welcome back, Chair. I'll hand back over to you now.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Rook. Let's move on now to the next item on the agenda. So we're going to 4.5, which is application DM 2023/01329, change of use of Glebe Bungalow from an annex and holiday let to a dwelling house. That's going to be presented by Phil Thomas. So, Phil.
Thank you, Chair. Check we're on the right slide. Yeah, we are. Okay, thank you. So this is an application some of us visited yesterday. It relates to an existing building called Glebe Bungalow. Originally granted permission under TC 2007 application as an annex to Glebe Cottage, which is immediately to its south. In 2009, and subsequently permission was granted in 2017 to vary the condition, allowing it to be occupied as an annex, but also so that it could be let out as a holiday let under a 2017 application. The building itself replaced a static caravan that was on site and occupied as an annex to Glebe Cottage to the south, and that was granted a certificate of lawful use in 2007, owing to the passage of time it had been there and legally used. And in 2020, the applicant sold the main house, the Glebe Cottage, thereby severing the tie between the house and the annex to the north. So the site is located on the edge of the hamlet of Llantilio Pertholi, to the north of Abergavenny, and the village is not classified as a major or minor village. Well, it's not really a village, it's a hamlet, isn't it? It's not a major or minor village under LDP policy S1. The location is therefore considered to be open countryside. And for clarity, the site sits outside the development boundary of Abergavenny, which is to the west on the opposite side of Hereford Road. So if I just run through the slides. That's the property in question, with the access off the road running through the hamlet. That's the property. It's 2 bedrooms and a living room, kitchen, dining area, and bathroom with a porch as well. That's the access off the road running through the hamlet. That's looking back up towards where that picture was taken, with the property on the left and a large manoeuvring parking area there. There's a patio outside and a fence which divides the annex, as I call it, Glebe Bungalow from Glebe Cottage Reserve to the left-hand side there. There's a stream in the far distance, above which you can see properties in the far distance that have been built at Derry Farm housing site. That's the property. It's a stone-built property with a slate roof. And I'll leave it on that slide in terms of the summing up of the key issues. So works were complete on the building by 2013. As stated in paragraph 1.1 of the report, the building replaced a static caravan that was on the site. For personal reasons, the applicant had to sell Glebe Cottage, which is the primary dwelling, thus separating ownership of Glebe Cottage and Glebe Bungalow, as the annex building is now called. As such, it's no longer possible for the applicant to comply with the condition attached to either planning permissions, the one in 2007, granted in 2009, or the 2017 holiday let permission. The condition also allows the use of the building as holiday accommodation, although this would not be of benefit to the applicant who wishes to live in the property himself. It remains a viable option for the building, given it can no longer be used as an annex, having been hived off from the parent property, and a holiday let would offer benefit to the economy of the wider area. Officers do have a lot of sympathy that the applicant has had personal reasons for the separation of ownership of the site, but the application should be determined on its planning merits. In terms of planning policy, the change of use of the building from annex to self-contained dwelling arguably, it does fall to be considered under LDP policy H4, which is to do with conversion of redundant buildings in the open countryside. It's important to highlight the supporting text around policy H4, which states, the conversion or rehabilitation of buildings in the open countryside for residential use is an exception to national policies which generally seek to strictly control residential development in the open countryside. And this is reinforced with criterion E of policy H4, which sets out that buildings of modern and or utilitarian construction and materials such as concrete blockwork, portal frame buildings clad in metal sheeting, or buildings of substandard quality or incongruous appearance will not be considered favourably for residential conversion. Other buildings will be expected to have been used for their intended purpose for a significant period of time, and particularly close scrutiny will be given to proposals relating to those less than 10 years old, especially where there has been no change in activity on the unit. Now, that is broadly talking about the not just a planning unit, but could be a farm or something like that. The property is a modern purpose-built 2-bedroom dwelling now set in its own garden. It's served by an access, as we've seen, off-road parking, and has its own private foul drainage. There are no objections to the proposal in respect of amenity, impact on amenity, means of access or drainage. It's not disputed that the building has been constructed to a high standard in terms of its appearance and would not require any physical changes, but it is undoubtedly of modern construction, being completed in 2013. And as such, its quality of design standard does not fundamentally outweigh the failure to comply with criterion E of policy H4. Therefore, the proposal is considered unacceptable in principle. The conversion of this modern annex holiday let into a residential dwelling does not meet that criterion, and there are no overriding reasons to allow the development of a new dwelling in the open countryside. Policy LC1 outlines that there's presumption against new built development in the open countryside unless justified under national policy and or LDP policies. The application does not outline any rationale for construction of this unjustified new build dwelling in the open countryside, and therefore the proposal does conflict with the requirements of policies S1 and LC1 of the LDP. The applicant's agent has suggested the proposed use of the building in question, being in the region of 10 years old, is supported by LDP policy H4 and the associated supplementary planning guidance. The planning authority does need to look at such cases involving relatively recently built properties very carefully, and officers are not convinced that the use of the building has been lawful for a sufficient period given its history of use, which has shifted from an annex to a separate dwelling within that 10-year period. So consequently, officers do not agree that policy H4 is satisfied, and we would, with a heavy heart, recommend refusal of the application. Thank you.
Thank you, Phil. And we don't have the ward member present or the town and community council. And we've got nobody wishing to speak from an objector's point of view. So, Owen Davis, as you're supporting the application, you've got 4 minutes, and you can either do it from there or come to the front. It's up to you.
Can you hear me? I think I'll do it from here, Chair.
Okay, that's fine.
Okay. I'd like to begin, thank you, Chair. I'd like to begin by stating what we, the applicants and the officers agree on. As already been mentioned, the bungalow is over 10 years old and has been used as an annex to the adjoining cottage for the majority of this time. We agree that there are unique personal circumstances with the backdrop of COVID that led to the sale and separation of the cottage from the annex. We also agree that the applicant was not made aware by his solicitors of the planning implications of having the annex separated from the cottage, and there's been no deliberate attempt by the applicant to evade the planning system. Indeed, through making this application, Mr. Kerwin would like to correct this breach. The committee report states that the bungalow has been constructed to a high quality, traditional materials have been used, and has its own garden and access. I'm sure members who attended the site visit would also agree. The applicant's application only receives positive support from its neighbours, and there's been no objections. Where we do disagree, however, is in terms of the interpretation of policy H4, which has already been mentioned, particularly criteria E. Now, criteria E, like most policies, is open to interpretation. It states that modern, utilitarian and incongruous buildings will not be considered favourably for residential use. It also states that converting residential buildings of less than 10 years old will be subject to close scrutiny. It's important to state, though, that the policy does not say that these will not be permitted. Because policy H4 is open to interpretation, the Planning Committee has previously approved a supplementary planning guidance for this specific case. The SPG is written to inform applicants, like my client, officers and also members how to interpret policy H4. Now, paragraph 3.15 of this guidance, which you can look at on the Council's website, explicitly states that quality modern buildings of around 10 years old, possessing traditional character and constructed to modern methods are eligible for residential conversion if used for their intended purposes for a substantial period. Whilst we highlighted this guidance in our planning application, and it is a material consideration, I think it's crucial that this was missing from the committee report. Whilst the SPG is indeed guidance, it doesn't carry the same weight as the SPG policy H4. It's logical to ask yourselves why it was drafted in the first place by officers, why it was consulted on by this planning authority, and then why was it adopted by this committee if it was then to be completely ignored. We believe the guidance gives officers reasons to approve this application. And to conclude, it seems appropriate to consider what would happen if this application is refused today. Now, Mr. Kerwin would be forced to sell glebe bungalows as a holiday let. Now, we've actually had that valued by local estate agents in Abergavenny, and it would be significantly below market value for a residential property. The financial consequences would jeopardise Mr Cohen's ability to secure replacement property, potentially leading to him to become homeless and in need of affordable housing. For the local authority, this would mean the loss of a high-quality dwelling from the local housing stock and put further pressure on already strained supply of local housing. Now, I think we all agree that at a time of cost of living issues, we should be prioritising more affordable homes in Monmouthshire and not more holiday homes, and help to reduce the cost of housing that the local authority has to bear. And finally, Mr Cohen's self-employment as a local builder and a skilled stonemason based at Glebe Bungalows would also suffer adverse consequences. He would have to move his business and the places where he stores his equipment to another location as yet unknown. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Mr Davis. I didn't notice that the local member was online, so give Malcolm the opportunity of coming in. Councillor Lane.
Thank you, Chairman. I had seen Owen Davis's submission, and I certainly agree with his findings on the matter. I would certainly support this application. That's all I need to say about it. But I would ask the committee to look at it favourably.
Okay, thank you for that. Those of us who went to site on Monday will have seen, and it was in the photographs, it's very substantially built. It complements the property next door and is clearly a separate plot. But members have got the opportunity of looking at it now. Councillor McConnell.
Thank you, Chair. There's a couple of comments, really. Firstly, just some comments. As annexes go, that's not my idea of an annex. My grandmother lived in an annex which was attached to a house, so it is a peculiar situation we're looking at. I'm sure we are all more than sympathetic with the sort of history of why the situation has arisen, although that's not a planning matter, but I'd like to register our sympathy there. It is of high quality, the building, and a huge improvement, I imagine, on the static caravan that was there before, although that, again, isn't a planning matter. We should acknowledge it. The other thing we need to acknowledge is that this committee regularly tussles with planning applications which are connected to policies that are there to protect the open countryside. And so we have to be very careful, I think, about how we approach this. However, this application seems to me to fall on a cusp. Mr Davis has made helpful comments about the interpretation of guidance, but it does seem to be absolutely on a cusp. It's on a cusp in terms of a inverted commas significant period of time. It's clearly been lived in as a building close to the other building for the duration, but in a succession of technically changes of use. But it's sort of on the cusp of that. Geographically, it's also on the cusp. Although it's technically an open countryside, it's actually bang next door to a housing development. So the idea that it's somehow plonked in the, it's not sitting in the middle of open countryside, in the middle of an otherwise unbuilt-on landscape. And for those reasons, I think taking into account all of those things, on balance, I'm in favour of this application because of those special considerations. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor McConnell. Councillor Powell.
Thank you, Chairman. I agree with a lot of Councillor McConnell has said. It is a very difficult situation, and looking at that property the other day, it's a very pleasing property, and it does suit the area. It seems a strange thing that it was made an annex when it was so far away from the house in the first place. But it's difficult because the rules are that you can't have a new build in the open countryside as such. But it is, as Sue said, it's close to a lot of other houses, not right out of the country, but the rules are the rules which make it difficult. But what seems so strange is the fact that it could still go on being a holiday let, but not a residential. So what would there be to stop the gentleman hiring it for his holiday and having a rather long holiday, you know what I mean, to get round it that way. But it is a very difficult situation. You've got a nice-looking building in the wrong place. What happens if we refuse it? And nobody buys it? Does it get pulled down? What happens to it? That's the question we've got to look at, and I don't know if the officers can answer me that. I suppose it would just have to be put on the market, and who's going to run the fact that it's a letting place? It wouldn't be next door neighbours because they don't want it. It would have to be somebody from somewhere else. It's all very complicated, and it's a very difficult situation. But I don't think the officers can advise me about what would happen if it wasn't used. Thank you.
There's been several questions raised. I think what we'll do is we'll go to the end, and then I'll invite Phil to come in and give you a chance to think of the answers, Phil. Councillor Bryn.
Diolch. I understand that provision of permanent housing would not be permitted in this location, as it's contrary to national and local policies of building in the open countryside, and so the building has a condition imposed upon it specifying its use as a holiday accommodation. But I also understand that one of the few circumstances in which new isolated residential developments may be acceptable in open countryside is where it would enable rural enterprise workers to live at or close to their place of work. As the applicant works as a stonemason in the close vicinity of the dwelling, could it therefore be acceptable to grant permission subject to a condition that ties the occupation of the new house to the existing business? Also, if members are still concerned, I understand that occasionally a planning permission may be granted which is subject to a condition that it shall only be for the benefit of a named person. Therefore, could we propose that we grant the applicant permission to live at the dwelling for as long as he is able, and that this condition is revisited when the applicant decides to move on? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bryn. Councillor Riley.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to make a few points. That was an interesting point made by Councillor Bryn. But my understanding is that for 3 out of the 10 years, this property, 7 out of the 10 years, this property has been let, and that now personal circumstances have resulted in this application. So do we have any figures? Because what I'm hearing is that this not being a let is to the detriment of the local area and the economy. Do we have any figures as to how much we're losing from from holidaymakers coming in using, or this gentleman using local services himself? I think I would say that we are where we are. There's nothing to be gained from not approving this application. And I understand Councillor Bryn's point, but then we have when a gentleman retires, what happens then if he has nobody else to take over his business? So I would say, although this is all very pragmatic, I can't see what we have to gain by not approving this application, and I would propose that we do. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Riley. Councillor Birch.
Thank you, Chair. I mean, we rightly have very strong policies against residential development other than affordable housing in the open countryside. But I think there are a number of issues we need to look at here. One, is this a building which is suitable for residential occupation? And clearly it is. It's a desirable home. It is not a building which requires extension or improvement to be suitable for residential occupation. It is no more suitable for holiday let than it is for residential occupation. The other thing is this a sustainable location? And obviously it is. I think to call it a property in the open countryside is, whilst it may be the case in strict policy terms, is really rather stretching the point. It's on a site between the railway line, the river and the main road. Approximately, I would have said 5 or 10 minutes walk from the shop, the pub, the bus stop. So it is actually a highly sustainable location. The only matter that gives me concern about its use as residential premises really is the aspect of the floodplain, but we are told that, and having seen it myself, having seen how far above the river it is in fact built, we're told in the report that there are no particular concerns about that we would effectively be approving a residential property that is likely to flood. So. Councillor Riley, I see from the chat, Councillor Riley has and from listening, has proposed we approve. I would be very happy to second that.
Yeah, that's what. Councillor Butler, and then I'll ask the officers to come back in.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to agree, actually, with much of what's been said, particularly with Councillor McConnell and most recently with Councillor Birch. I think the whole pivot point for this with me is around the supplementary planning guidance, and I think it's paragraph 315, which is what I've noted, which is about rural conversion to residential material guidance. This building is constructed to a very high quality with traditional materials. It's traditional in character, and therefore I think it's eligible for residential conversion. It's not modern or incongruous, and I think under supplementary planning guidance we should approve it. I think it's open to interpretation. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Butler. Phil, do you want to come back in on any of those points?
Yeah, very briefly. I don't want to labour the point. Just in terms of Councillor Powell's question about what would happen if we refuse the application, and for instance it went to appeal and the appeal was unsuccessful, the property would have to be marketed presumably by the current occupier for holiday let purposes. That's its lawful use. It can't be used as an annex anymore because the land's been sold separately to the Glebe Cottage unless Glebe Cottage wants to buy it back, which seems a very remote possibility. So the only realistic offer would be to market it for a holiday let, and it could be run, I'm just hypothetically, by somebody living in Abergavenny or in the wider area, but you know, that's a scenario that could be reasonable, a reasonable prospect. In terms of the holiday let use, my understanding is even though it's been consented as a holiday let, I don't think it's actually ever been used as a holiday let. It's never been let out. So in terms of calculating the loss of income for the local economy compared to somebody living in there, that would be a pretty much impossible task, I'm afraid. We haven't got the data on that, but at least I'm trying to clarify the point that it's got consent or lawful use for a holiday let, but it's not been used for that purpose. It's either been used as an annex initially in conjunction with Glebe Cottage and then later as a separate dwelling by the current applicant. That was pretty much it, really.
What about Councillor Prince?
Yeah, in terms of rural enterprise, to anything that's stretching the point that a stonemason needs to live in the countryside, even though their business, their yard might be nearby, they could live. I don't think they qualify as a rural enterprise worker in a sense that they have to live in the countryside. They could live in Abergavenny or within the town. So I don't think a rural enterprise worker condition would be appropriate in this instance. I don't think it would meet the tests in the TAN 6 guidance. Personal condition is an option, but really, if members' argument is that on balance, interpreting policy H4 that you could argue that this is on the cusp and meets on balance that criterion in H4, then I don't think you'd be really going down the road of a personal condition, because you really then the only reason a personal condition would be appropriate is if the circumstances of that individual are so outweigh the planning issues that you would opt for that, and I don't think you'd rarely go down that road anyway, because rarely will personal circumstances outweigh the normal planning issues. I think you're better really keeping it simple, and it would be an unfettered residential permission for the current applicant rather than it be guided by a personal condition. I don't think that would be appropriate in this instance. It either meets policy H4 or it doesn't, I think. if that's helpful.
Okay, thank you, Phil. Nobody else is... Councillor Rook.
Yes, Chair. If we were minded to approve this application, is there any other conditions that we could apply to it to maintain it so in its current form, i.e., removal of PD rights or other ways that we can mitigate any further intensification there of that premises?
Phil?
Thanks.
Yeah, Paige will come in on that.
I just want to flag, so with this application, obviously it is recommended for refusal. From conversation, it seems members may be minded to go against officer recommendation. So in that case, we would be looking for a motion to defer so it can then come back to a later committee with any relevant conditions, so then it can be voted on then.
Yes, we've had indications all the way through that members were minded to go against officer recommendation. That being the Councillor Webb.
Could I suggest this is deferred until a further meeting, the planning committee? Thank you.
Yes, thank you. I was just about to ask if somebody was prepared to move that it be deferred. So I'll ask Richard to put up that it would be deferred to come back for approval at a later committee. Is that comfortable with everybody? Yeah, I'm getting nods around the room. Yeah, everybody online. So, Richard, can we have that in the voting function, please? Can everybody vote now, please? If the screen stays still long enough. All those then.
Okay, yeah, so that motion to defer has been carried, 12 for deferral, 1 against.
Okay, thank you, everybody. In that case, we move on to the third item on the agenda, which is item 4.1 on the original agenda, which is DM 2023-00711, reopening existing gateway at Treetops, Tallycoid Road, Llantilio, Cresceni. The officer presenting that is Phil, so over to you, Phil.
Thank you, Chair. This site, again, was one we had a look at yesterday. It's very cold. The site's located adjacent to a 5-acre field, just off a lane which spurs off to the north from the B road there that's run from Llanfapli down towards Llantrillio Cresceni and then onwards eastwards. So this is a Tallycoid area. The old halfway inn is down to the south on the main road there, just so you get your bearings if you weren't on the visit yesterday. Site's in open countryside located in the wider rural area of, as I say, Llantilio Cresceni stroke Tallycoid. This is partly retrospective. It seeks planning permission to create an access into the field adjacent to and from the single track lane through what was an existing hedge, a field maple, oak and hazel, as based on 2009 and 2011 Street View imagery that we'd had a look at. Given the importance of agriculture and farming in the county, LDP policy RE4 is supportive of new farm accesses in the countryside, subject to them being reasonably required for agriculture or forestry purposes, and meeting the criteria in policy LC1. So this is an agricultural field with a requirement for new farm access suitable for modern farming practices and equipment. There is no objection in principle to the access being provided in this location, subject to detailed criteria. So let's have a look at the that's the original suggestion of the original situation on the left, and then the proposal as it is now. And then that shows the planting plan. So the gateway would be set back 5 metres from the highway. In fact, it was set back more than that when we were on site yesterday. And the access has a width of approximately 15 metres where it meets the public highway. The ground level of the access needs to be made level with that of the highway, and the applicant has submitted plans that would see the hedgerow taken back in aid of visibility splays, creating splays of 60 metres to the north and south. Some trees in the hedgerow have been surveyed, well, all the trees, sorry, in the hedgerow have been surveyed, and the majority that are sought to be removed are in poor condition or vulnerable to disease. So new planting should improve the longer-term health of the hedgerow. And in fact, that plan there on the left shows that there's going to be, as well as the hedgerow, 4 trees planted, 2 oaks, and I can't see what AC is, but there'd be native species trees. So I haven't got that, but they would be either field maples or ash tree, mountain ash trees. AC, I'm trying to think what AC might be.
Acer field maple.
Well, it could be AC, well, yeah, field maple, well done. Merit to Councillor Butler there. Thank you. A landscaping plan highlights, as I say, the proposed hedgerow and tree planting to enhance existing hedges and extend them towards the new gate. And this is referenced by a planting schedule and compensate for any impacts and loss as a result of the re-establishment of the access and the position of visibility splays. Once the planting matures, the new access will be satisfactorily assimilated within its setting, therefore complying with policy LC1. The detailed landscaping plan provided via amended plans includes a 5-year maintenance plan. A condition can be attached to secure the implementation of the submitted planting details within the first planting season following completion of the access improvements. The highway is flanked by mature hedgerow and trees, and based on the visual impact of the change is considered to be very localised in terms of any change and impact on landscape. Accesses of this nature are considered commonplace in the open countryside, and essential for machinery and livestock movement, regardless how often this may be in use. And given the above, it's considered that the alteration would not be detrimental to the overall character and appearance of the area to warrant refusal of the application, and it's considered compliant with policies DES1 and RE4. Highways had requested a speed and traffic survey should take place as evidence to support a reduction in visibility standards, albeit that the 60mm splays are being provided north and south. However, given the land use of the site, officers are satisfied on balance that a reasonable and pragmatic approach can be taken. Whilst a speed and traffic survey has not been undertaken, we don't feel this is a reason to withhold planning permission. If a more intensive land use was to be served by the access than is proposed now, then a survey would be considered reasonable and necessary. However, the site would continue to be used for agricultural purposes in a rather intermittent manner based on common agricultural practice, and the lane, moreover, is lightly trafficked. Officers are satisfied that the development is not likely to create significant and unacceptable additional traffic growth in relation to the capacity of the existing road network, and we feel that it's acceptable and having regard to the provisions of LDP policy MV1. So we would recommend approval, subject to the conditions set out on pages 9 to 10 of the agenda, including the new planting, which would help achieve satisfactory assimilation into the landscape and biodiversity enhancement. Thank you.
Thank you, Phil. The local member is unwell and unable to attend, but he's asked Councillor Howells to speak on his behalf. So, Councillor Howells.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, Councillor Chandler has asked me to pass on their apologies. They are unwell and unable to attend today. Councillor Chandler has asked me to speak on their behalf to outline the concerns of local residents with regards to this application. Their concerns are around the hedgerow was removed without permission, with a loss to biodiversity, no evidence regarding a previous access, road safety through visibility from the access, and the increase in traffic volume. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Howells. We've got nobody else registered to speak on this one. So, Councillor Powell.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, I support this. Having been, years ago, having been farming, I understand trying to get into fields. If they want to go into that field with a mower to mow the grass, because they haven't had it grazed off, to turn into there without it having that splayed entrance, to turn off that road is almost impossible, even with quite a small mower. So it is necessary that they do have that width. And the fact that they're going to replant hedges along where the fences are on the splay there isn't really going to be detrimental to the countryside, because those hedges are going to grow up and they'll be nice and green, and the bit that's going to be taken out is rather had it, I think. It does look so, because I can't see a problem with it. I mean, it's far more safer for the people on that road, if they can get off the road fairly quickly with their implements or whatever, than trying to manoeuvre and get into it without it having the splay. So I think it's, I can't see any reason against it, and I think it's needed. And I propose that we accept it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that. Councillor Cook.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. In principle, I don't have any objections to it, but one can't help think, and I understand that we can only judge what's in front of us, but this applicant will have something else for that land, maybe camping or whatever you want to call it. It already has 10 metres of open area, but the one thing that I've noticed in the last 12 months, that we're getting a lot more retrospective applications, and I think as Monmouthshire County Council Planning Department, we need to get quite clearly across to further applicants that I am uneasy on looking at the retrospective applications, and they are becoming more apparent, and that may be that we are perhaps a little bit too easy or allowing too many things to go through the system. I'd like to put it on record, please, if I may.
There is always a lot of frustration on that, because the rules state that had the application been put in the first place and we would have approved it, well then we must look at it for approval, even though it's retrospective, but it is very infuriating. I agree. Officers, do you want to come in on that?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Thank you, Councillor Crook, for raising this concern. It is a concern across all local planning authorities across Wales, and colleagues that I speak to with regards to retrospective applications. They are unnerving because development has occurred on site. It's been done without planning consent, without the benefit of planning consent. But as we've said before, we need to look at this with a fresh pair of eyes and look at it. We can't, we're not here to penalise people for doing things without planning consent. Some people just do things unaware of the need for consent. So we just need to look at it in that respect. I don't think there's a particular need a concern in Monmouthshire. We haven't seen a spike in the level of retrospective planning applications or the reduction. This is sort of the same amount we have every year. We've got trends going back decades ultimately in terms of having retrospective applications, and it's the same in other local planning authorities as well. It's just that they are slightly more difficult to deal with, I would suggest, because of the implications of the work being done. But as we all know, members need to consider these type of applications based on the merits. Imagine if it wasn't conducted on site. I personally don't have any concerns with retrospective applications going up, and I think you've seen from previous applications we've discussed today, the local planning authority will take enforcement action when they consider development to be unacceptable. But yeah, so I mean, we do have enforcement training coming up shortly, which one of the topics for planning committee will be on retrospective applications, so we will pick this topic up with members again. I think that training is in the diary for the end of January, isn't it? Yeah. So I think, yeah, so we will pick that conversation up again, Councillor Crook.
Okay, thank you for that. Councillor Butler.
Thank you, Craig, for explaining the retrospective nature of this application. And I do actually ask if it's up for approval. Is this why it's been brought to this committee? Could it have been approved without it?
I think we did have 5 more.
Oh, right, okay, sorry.
No, having said sorry. No, I think we had 4 or 5 objections, but the reason it definitely is because the local member referred it.
Oh, I see.
Who apologised for not being able to speak today, hence Councillor.
Thank you. That clarifies that for me. Thank you. Looking at it from the point of view as if it was not there, I just feel knowing where I live and the amount of machinery that comes past my house, I know how big this machinery is these days, and I know that the farmers can't get machinery into their fields without, they've got legacy gateways. So, from that point of view, I perfectly understand where the farmers are, and I think we really must support our farmers. They're our feeders too. So, I do support this, and I think it also, I take the point about the access for National Grid, is it, and the access needed for the generator that's on site, or the poles that are on site. So I'm quite happy to approve this. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Butler. Councillor Easton.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Sorry I was late. I had another meeting to go to. I do also support the comments that Councillor Crook is making regarding retrospective applications. It sets in train, to me, a situation where you then maybe have to go into enforcement, and enforcement causes a problem where sometimes the person being enforced on just ignores you and carries on building, and the retrospective application then becomes a default application and is passed through. So I think that, whereas it may not be a major problem across Wales or in Monmouthshire, I do believe that it causes concern for constituents who live in and around that particular area, and I believe that there should be a tying down more of retrospective applications. What would be the situation if this application had come forward and you said, no, we don't accept it, and we put an enforcement on it? What would the action? What would be the action then?
Sorry, Tony, we were listening to that. Yeah, we were listening to that. Thank you for that. Councillor Rock.
Thank you, Chair. Whilst we were looking at the presentation at the beginning of this application, the blue line drawing showed the road to the south that also bordered the fields. Is the application for the gateway in its current location the best location that could be justified in the wider aspect of the field, because some of it borders elsewhere onto other roads, and giving the concerns from original concerns from highways of a smaller visibility display than is acceptable, could it be located somewhere else?
It was pretty well in the middle of a straight run from two corners, so it probably is. I'll see what offers.
Well, I haven't got a real answer to that. We have to look at what's proposed really in front of us. There might be an alternative, but if the current scheme is acceptable in planning terms and officers are recommending that it is, the fact that there might be another field access that they could come into from further down near the B Road is not really material to this application. As long as what they're proposing is reasonable in planning terms, that's what we have to look at. Highways, we're concerned about speed of traffic because it's a deregulated stretch of highway. So in theory you could do 60 miles up there, but you'd be silly if you did try and approach the road in that speed because it's too narrow and there's hedgerow growing up either side that you can't, it's too narrow. So you'd have to travel. I would suggest at speeds of not more than 30 miles an hour on that road to drive safely and responsibly. So that's why we were suggesting that a speed survey wasn't really necessary for slow-moving farm traffic, which would be using this access.
Thank you, Phil. Councillor Prynne.
Hi, I just wondered, can someone explain to me what our responsibilities are in relation to the Hedgerows Regulation Act 1997? Does the applicant need to justify the need for this second field access, and that then outweighs the cost of the loss of hedgerow, or how do we stand with that?
Well, they've applied for permission to provide the access. The access is, I appreciate it's retrospective or part retrospective, so we haven't got the hedgerow there now to fully assess. But based on what's there remaining to be removed, That's been assessed against a tree condition survey or hedgerow condition survey, and there's been consultation with our ecologist and our green infrastructure landscape officer, and both have come back saying, subject to A, B and C, then this scheme is acceptable and conditions are applied. So we've made that assessment in terms of the loss of hedgerow and then mitigation and enhancement in terms of the proposed planting within this scheme. So we've carried out, if you like, any duty we have in terms of loss of trees or protection of trees under the guise of the mantle of this planning application. That's been assessed properly as part of that process.
Okay, thanks, Phil. I've got nobody else down to speak. We've got a recommendation for approval. I've had proposal from Councillor Powell and seconded by several people. It was Councillor McConnell. Richard, can we have the voting function up, please? Can we all vote now then, please?
Okay, so that's approved, 14 for approval.
Thanks very much, Paige. The next one we want to look at today is item 4.2, which is application DM 2023-01030. It's the proposed residential development of 46 affordable dwellings in Caldicot. And Amy.
Thank you very much, Chair. So the slides are up. So the application site is the former Caldicot School, situated between the Asda Superstore and the rear of Caldicot High Street and the new Caldicot High School and Leisure Centre. The site is shown here in the red line. And the next slide shows the aerial view of the site having been cleared a few years ago. And you can see Woodstock Way borders the site to the north, east and west, with the school and playing fields to the south. The application seeks residential development of 46 affordable homes delivered by Monmouthshire Housing Association, as well as the associated internal road layout and landscaping. The next slide shows the proposed layout of the site, which incorporates a mix of sizes of buildings. To the south of the site, there are 17 houses forming a terrace with a mix of 2, 3 and 4 bed properties. These all have private gardens to the rear and access and parking to the central green space. To the north, there is a proposed block of flats, a mix of 2- and 3-storey blocks forming the corner at the top of the site. And to the east and west, there are blocks of 2-storey walk-up flats. Parking's incorporated within the central space between the flats, as well as bin and bike storage. The application has recently been modified in relation to the highway concerns over the internal one-way system road layout. This has been changed to form a two-way system, which is considered to be an improvement to the highway and addresses the safety concerns. In addition, concerns were raised by Highways in relation to the number of parking spaces. There are proposed 50 parking spaces. The requirement as per the parking standards is 1 space per bed, up to a maximum of 3 per dwelling. And the highway officer noted that a reduction in standards could be adopted given the sustainable location in terms of active travel, public transport and access to local amenities. In addition, of the 50 spaces, 45 are for residents, 5 are visitor spaces, and there are 36 EV charging points, which is far more than policy compliant. The next slide shows the landscaping plan, showing the street trees and areas of green planting to the northern boundaries and the central open space. Concerns were received over the lack of native species. However, this has been addressed and there are no further objections from our ecologist or the green infrastructure officer. In addition, the SAB officers have considered the proposals and are satisfied that a suitable scheme via a separate SAB approval process can be achieved. Therefore, there are no objections. The next slide shows the boundaries to the site, which will be planted with shrubs, and the garden boundaries to the terrace will be of brick walls where these face onto the street scene. Some concerns were raised by active travel in relation to the suitability of pathways and the provision and location of cycle parking and the rear access to the southern terrace. The site is not overly large, and in order to maximise the available space for affordable homes, some compromises have to be made. The cycle parking is located between the blocks of flats set back from the road, and whilst this might not be ideal, it is considered accessible and available for all. In addition, the width of the pavements within the site is considered acceptable. The narrow path in front of the terrace to the south is supplemented by a wider path adjacent to the road, as can be seen on the site plan. In addition, concerns that the path to the southeast corner would not link to the school were raised. However, it is understood that for safeguarding reasons, the school needs to restrict accessing this, we've ensured that the access is available should the school be able to open that and manage access into their site in the future. Additional planting has also been incorporated into this corner to improve the character of this space. The next slide shows the plans and elevations of the properties. The first slide shows house type A, which you can see is the general approach into the design has been more contemporary to fit in with the context of the site and provide a sense of place. The brickwork is a consistent theme throughout the development, broken up with different textures and colours on the larger blocks of flats. House type A is very similar to house type B to maintain a coherent street scene. That next slide shows the floor plan of house type C, which is a 3-bed property. And the next slide shows the elevations again in line with house type A. So the next slide shows the floor plan of the corner house, which is a 4-bedroomed house. And again, the elevations all in the same architectural style. The next couple of slides show the floor plans for the walk-up flats and again, their elevations. So the next slide shows the flats to the north corner of the site facing Woodstock Way. Here we can see a mix of 2- and 3-storey elements to the building. And the next street scene, the top image when you're looking into the street from the west. And lastly, the proposed terrace from the inside of the site looking south. Concerns have also been raised from Caldicot Town Council, including the lack of information. However, officers feel that the information submitted is thorough and sufficient to make an assessment of the suitability of the proposals, including the transport assessment, preliminary ecological appraisal, flood consequence and drainage assessment, together with a tree survey, ground site investigation and comprehensive plans. They are concerned that there's been a lack of community engagement. However, the application has been through all the required consultation procedures, as well as a public pre-application consultation carried out by the developer as required. There are also concerns that land was intended for community use. However, the application is considered on its own merits and not the suitability of alternative proposals that are not before us today. In addition, the proposal is a provision of affordable homes which is considered necessary to meet local needs. Concerns have also been raised by the active travel officer in relation to the application. As mentioned, this relates to the provision of access through the site to the school. And despite concerns that the school boundary is secure at present, the provision of an access is included, which facilitates direct access to the leisure centre and the school, which could in the future be utilised. Given the gradient of ground levels to Woodstock Way, the lack of a pedestrian footpath and access to this corner of Woodstock Way would not be feasible as an alternative. There are concerns over the provision of the suitable pathways. Again, this is considered acceptable, and the proposed pedestrian alleyway to the rear of the terrace is not considered to be or was not considered to be appropriate, nor promote a safe environment. However, this has not been removed from the plans, but details in relation to secure access to this pathway, together with lighting, have been added as a condition to ensure that the safety is maintained. There were concerns that the cycle provision is not ideally positioned, but this is located between the flats near the bin store. The cycle storage will also be provided in outside sheds for all of the houses to ensure that adequate provision across the site has been provided. In addition, EV chargers are provided across the site, and this is provided at 36 spaces, which is far over and above the required policy compliance. In terms of environmental health, there were concerns over air quality, noise and contaminated land aspects of the proposals. However, no concerns have been in relation to air quality or contaminated land, and the appropriate conditions have been included in the officer's report. In terms of noise, it was requested that a noise assessment should be undertaken. However, given the site context, it was considered that a suitable condition to ensure the properties are maintained to a standard is required. Overall, the application is considered to be acceptable and will deliver 46 much-needed, affordable, high-quality homes, improving the appearance of this brownfield site. The site is considered to be in a sustainable location, close to a wider range of facilities, leisure and educational establishments, as well as good public transport connections. There are no highway, ecology, landscape, flooding or environmental health concerns, and despite some concerns from the Town Council and active travel, it is considered that on balance, the proposals are acceptable.
Thank you, Amy. And yeah, a site that's certainly designed to fit in with the school next door. We've got nobody registered to speak on this, including the local member, but very close to that is Councillor Easton. So, Councillor Easton.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I'm going to find this very difficult to express. I'm not against the plan. I know we need housing and not what for the community, but I believe that, and I'm not talking on behalf of Caldicot Town Council, I know their view is that in 2011, when you were member of finance, cabinet member of finance, there was a big controversy about selling the ground on Asda the ground to Asda for 4 acres. There's a lot of controversy because the people in Caldicot didn't want to sell that ground off. But under Bob Greenland's guidance, he came back to us and we had a referendum in Caldicot that any land removed from the school footprint would go back to public and community and sports use. There's a referendum in Caldicot which was 2-to-1 in favour of doing that. Now, we are where we are 10 years on, and there is need for housing, and I support the need for housing, but I don't believe that Caldicot Town Council has been given proper respect by going back to them and talking about rescinding the view that they had a referendum, which I think you supported, Phil, in 2011. I will abstain on this on principle, not against the plan, but on principle of the fact that I believe that Caldicot Town Council and the people of Caldicot should have had more reference on this before it was put up for housing. Whilst I agree with the need for housing, I think that the process has not been very good for the public of Caldicot. I'll abstain on this because on my principle that I lobbied for the members of the public in Caldicot to accept Bob Greenland's view that the land would be returned for public use, public and sports use. I reiterate, times have changed and aspects of time need to be looked at in terms of housing is required. But I believe that the authority should have gone back to Caldicot Town Council and Caldicot's people to express where we are and got their views on this, not just override them and roll over them in terms of putting this up for housing. I support the need for housing. I support the plan. It looks good. But I just wonder what the people of Abergavenny would think if they had housing put on Bailey Park or Chippenham Fields in Monmouth. So I'll abstain on this, and I will respect the views of the committee when they make the decision, but I don't believe that Caldicot Town Council and the people of Caldicot are being given the due respect in this matter. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Easton. And yeah, but I think, as you say, that was 10 years ago. Things have marched on, and personally, I don't really see it as a suitable site for that sort of recreational use now. It's been spoiled considerably by its use in the meantime. But again, that's a personal view. Anybody want to comment on that?
Not so much of a comment really, but I mean, we're here to talk about the planning merits of this planning application in terms of the planning application is before the planning committee, rather than any decisions that have been taken whether this land should be coming forward for housing or not. I would make the suggestion that this is adding back to the community by providing 46 affordable housing for the local residents in Caldecott. But I think, just to advise members, you're looking at the planning application today, not whether this land should be developed or not. That is not a question. You're looking at whether this development accords with your local development plan and the planning policies within that, rather than any decisions about whether this land should come forward or not.
Thank you, Craig. Councillor McConnell.
Yes, just a comment and a question. My comment is just to be sitting in the planning committee. It's been mentioned twice in the presentation, for which thank you, that the provision of EV charging points is far over and above that required by policy. And it's just so refreshing to see something put forward which isn't scraping itself over the bar, but is actually looking in a really positive way to something which is functional and sustainable. So I'd just like to acknowledge that. It's appreciated and welcomed. And my question is just a question. I think the plans are good and I'm in favour of them. That very narrow path round at the backs of the houses that goes, Phil, perhaps you could show us again, but there's a very narrow path which runs around the perimeter of the properties, and I believe there will be gates going from that path into each back garden. And I should have asked this at the time, because I've been to the site, looked at the plans. It's the height of the walls. If that's a very narrow path that's dark and narrow and windowless, effectively, I would worry about the vulnerability of people, especially children and women, frankly, going down that path. So it's a question about the height of that and whether that's been considered, so to give visibility to the outside each way. Thank you.
Amy?
So I could do more one, but that's fine. Yeah, we did look at that at great length, actually, that narrow pathway, and I had exactly the same concerns. So there's very valid points that you raised there. We did look at trying to get rid of it completely, and you would only have access from the front. However, the standards, the Welsh Housing Quality Standards, require that pathway at the back for fire escape purposes. So it is essential that we have that. Given that the site isn't the biggest in the world and we want to maximise the amount of properties that you can get on there, the access way then is 1 metre wide, and it'll have a 2 metre closed boarded fence up against it. So yes, again, we had concerns that going down there late at night, that's going to be a very narrow and dark pathway. So we had discussions of how we could mitigate that. So there'll be a gate at either end, and only the occupants of the 17 houses along that terrace will have access to that alleyway. So they'll be limited. It's not going to be a thoroughfare for people to run through, etc. And then they'll all have lockable gates at the back of their gardens, again, into their private gardens. And there'll also be lighting throughout there, and there's a condition on the proposals to require details of said security and lighting to ensure, again, that that's on a PIR of some sort, so we don't get lighting all night long, but you get it when you need it. So.
Okay, thanks for that. Councillor Butler.
Thank you, Amy, for that one. Actually, that was going to be my question. So thank you for asking. No. Thank you for asking it. But it does. This is an affordable housing development. We need housing. Most of the people who are going to be in here are going to be young people, and I'm just trying to put my head in that position of, well, would I want to live here? Okay, and I think that's not a bad thing to do, and that is making me feel very uneasy. It's a solution. I'm not sure it's the most brilliant solution, because anybody can, open a gate and go down an alleyway. But at least there are mitigations in place. My two other points I wanted to pick up on, though, were this is going to be managed by Mon Housing in perpetuity. Yeah, sorry. Struggling today. So I do actually have concerns about that. They would be able then, therefore, to stop people from putting up lighting and putting up fences and so on. So, that gives me, it just concerns me that if some of these go into private ownership, how tied up that requirement is for the rights of lighting and rights of enclosure. because you know, I know there's a small development in my own village where once houses are in private ownership, but people put fences up and so on. So I do have a few concerns about that, but that's way off in the future, isn't it? And the other thing, I can't see it anyway, but perhaps you can just tell me, will these dwellings have PV panels and are they going to have air source heat pumps? Thank you.
Yeah, I think it's all going to be managed by MHA, so there'll be no private ownership with that.
Yeah, this all proposed to be managed and built out by MHA, so there'll be a long-term management plan of the site, and if there are issues with people adding lighting, then again, as the landlord, they'll be able to manage that and make sure it's appropriate. There's also a proposed unilateral undertaking to make sure that all the properties then will be affordable homes, because if this was private market dwelling, we'd be looking for an affordable housing contribution or a percentage to be affordable, so we'll be able to secure that in the long term through that legal agreement. And in terms of PV and air source heat pumps, all the properties are, well, the Welsh standards require all properties to be what's the standard to EPC rating A, and they will be making the best use of renewables, for example, solar panels, air source heat pumps, and none of the properties will be using any fossil fuels for heating or electricity. So it's a highly sustainable development. And Monmouthshire Housing do have higher than those standards, looking to achieve better quality, thermal efficiency and ongoing management and maintenance of their buildings in terms of renewables and energy efficiency.
Thank you.
There was a point about the gates either end of that path. Did you say they were lockable? So residents will have some control over who goes at the back of it.
Yeah, it's intended that it's only the tenants of those 17 properties will have access to that alleyway. But as I say, there is a condition requiring the details of that.
Okay, Craig, you want to come in?
Thank you, Chair. Just to build on Councillor Butler's point about renewables and the sort of sustainability of these properties, just so you're aware, officers are working with Monmouthshire Housing Association and a number of other key developers to work on the net zero policy for the replacement local development plan. And speaking to Monmouthshire Housing representatives yesterday, they are going to be testing out some of that net zero technology on these properties. So they're rolling out and looking at their policies and procedures internally to try and deliver that type of housing moving forward. And this would be one of the sites that they would be looking to do that. So again, as they are doing with EV charging, Monmouthshire Housing will be going above and beyond the policy position and trying to achieve this on this site. So that's really, really positive, and hopefully moving forward the replacement plan will be able to do that. Well, there will be a key policy in the plan to deliver that type of housing across the county. So just to give members a bit of an update in terms of that work, and hopefully this site can be a bit of a trial for that technology going forward.
That's really good news, isn't it? Councillor Cook.
Yeah, it was encouraging when we had the site visit. Obviously, MHA are going beyond and above their criteria that were set down in the original application. So I'm really interested and keen that will happen. What I am a little concerned about is that did we, as Monmouthshire County Council, contact the local town council as to further discussions and keeping close communications, and even at the site visit on Monday, because disappointingly we had one person from Caldicot, and that was Councillor Eaton. There were no other local councillors there, and disappointingly today I see no further people from the town council. So probably we would need to keep a closer communication, but it acts both ways, really, doesn't it? If the town council were interested, why aren't they here today putting their point of view? So, you know, for the future, I think certainly affordable accommodation that we're pushing for the whole of area of Monmouthshire. Perhaps I suggest that we get a little bit closer to the local town councils in future and make them fully aware and give them an official invite.
Yeah, so yeah, go on.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Councillor Crook. Yeah, we would always consult the Community Council on every planning application. The agenda for planning committee is published, and obviously a local community council can have public rights to speak in, so it is an open forum, and they are more than welcome to attend these meetings and speak to members directly.
Councillor Rook.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Butler kind of pretty much asked my question, and then going back looking at the notes that were supplied in the reports. These properties are being developed with the Welsh Development Quality Requirements standards being applied to this development, which far outweighs the Welsh. Oh, I can't remember what it's called now. It's
Housing quality
Welsh Housing Quality Standards. I think so. This is a really positive contribution to us becoming a net zero county, and if we can ensure that this is continued throughout all of the proposed developments that we see throughout the area, it can only be applauded. So thank you very much for making sure that that type of thing is ongoing, and as part of that strategy, that policy that we have around the environment, it's good to see that the planning committee, planning officers are including that within their discussions. And it only leaves me to say that I propose that we accept the recommendation to approve this, and I'm looking for a seconder. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Rook. We've still got two people asking to speak, so we'll look for a seconder in a minute. Councillor Bryn.
Hi, thank you, Phil. I commend carbon neutrality and the sustainability of these homes and celebrate the fact that they're to be 100% affordable. Lord knows we need more affordable housing in Monmouthshire, though I am a little concerned about their brutalist design, I must admit. May I request protection for the green spaces? I see the central space as a great place for young children to meet and play, overlooked as it is by the community around it. And I am concerned that it will end up in much the same way as many of the green spaces in my ward, churned up and dug out by vehicles, the mud and grass smeared along the pathways. Perhaps if dragon's teeth were placed around the perimeter, this would be enough to prevent this from the outset. The only other thing I'd like to add really is that I was a bit disheartened to see valuable living and playing space lost for the setting of a two-way road, which seems excessive for such a short street, where one way surely would have sufficed. If speeding was a concern, then surely designing in elements to promote safe driving behaviours would have been more than enough. Narrower lanes shorten the distance for pedestrian crossings, so could we at least perhaps see a reduction to one lane at the two crossing points? Diolch yn fawr.
Thank you, Councillor Bryn. Amy, do you want to come back in on there? I know on the Merton Green development in Cowent, we tried that and it's backfired in some order where people park on the road and nobody can get past.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, this was something that we looked at on the site visits on Monday, and something that we thought about subsequently. To write a condition to require details of how the green space is going to be maintained and managed in perpetuity is complicated, difficult, and I don't think really the condition would be appropriate, necessary or enforceable, meeting any of the tests. What I would say is that the site is going to be managed by Monmouthshire Housing Association, and it is in their interest to maintain the high quality of the site and the appropriateness of that green open space. We do also have conditions that require landscape details to be submitted to, and those landscape details that would be approved to be adhered to, and the development built in accordance with those standards and maintained in perpetuity. So there is an opportunity there within those existing conditions that are already proposed to ensure that there can be some consideration of how the long-term management of those green spaces is maintained. There was a second part to your question as well, I think, wasn't there?
It was about
the one-way system. Yes, the one-way system. The two-way road network within the site has been very, very carefully considered and undergone revisions. And what I would say is that the site is very, very tight, and it was considered that that was necessary to have a full two-way system around the site in order to address those highways concerns. So I think if we were to go back then and look at narrowing it at the crossing points. That would potentially raise concerns from highways. But what I did check is after the meeting, or the site visit we had, is that there are raised areas of pavement where the main pathway that runs through the site connects or crosses the road. That is proposed to be designed to be pedestrian friendly, so encourage people to use that space and be safer. So there's like a raised section there at those two junctions essentially. So I think those on balance could address those concerns.
Okay, thank you, Amy. Councillor Webb.
Yes, thank you, Chair. If I may go back to Councillor Crook's comments regarding the Town Council and any representatives not being here today, I feel very strongly it's quite a big application, this, for Caldicot. I've been on this planning committee for some long time now, and I think we were one of the first in Wales to actually encourage town and community councillors to come and speak at planning meetings. And I think this is, they complain that they're not consulted and that they have no input into applications in this forum and in other forums. And I think we have always encouraged town and community councils to present their case. And I feel sad that there's nobody here from the town council here today. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Webb. Councillor Riley.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to raise on this particular type of development, and for future developments, I did raise it on Monday, that there isn't any provision for away from properties for the charging and storage of mobility scooters. And I was told that nobody'd heard of the sort of combustion issue. There is quite significant concern and research that this is happening. So I like this development. I'm not gonna not, and I would approve it, as Councillor Rook has asked for a seconder. But I do think we need to bring it to Monmouthshire Housing and other housing associations' attention that mobility scooters are having attended, because they're not used every day and they can be left on charge for long periods. There is a tendency sometimes for them to combust, and that they need to be stored away from the property. So I just wanted to raise that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Riley. And we did discuss that with MHA on Monday, didn't we? I think they had some provision, Amy?
There's no identified provision particularly for outside scooter parking and charging that could be incorporated within the buildings. And I think that's a management issue and a policy issue for MHA to consider how they're going to charge mobility scooters. But I think we'd be considering where you're putting those. I don't know whether there are lifts inside the flats or not, but again, if you were a mobility scooter, you'd be looking for a kind of lower level accommodation, so that could be accommodated elsewhere on the site. But I say that's a long-term management and policy issue for MHA.
Okay, thanks very much. We've got a recommendation for approval. That's been put forward also by Councillor Rook. Can I have a seconder for Councillor McConnell? Thank you very much. So, Richard, can we have the voting function up, please? Can everybody vote no then, please?
Sit still.
Yeah, sit still. You've got to choose your time to click, haven't you? Fortunately, it does say your response was sent to the app, so you know when it's happened. Paige?
So that's approved, 12 for approval and 1 abstain.
Thank you very much. We now go to the last application. We've got some other things to look at later on with regards to appeals, but the last one that we've got today is application DM 2023/01242, the construction of a workshop and machinery storage at Land Farm, Dehendra, and that's Phil.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, that site plan isn't that helpful. It doesn't really give you any context. But those of us who were lucky to go enough to go and freeze on site yesterday will have been a bit better educated as to its location. It's near the Hendra, but it's in open countryside, away from any immediate settlement. But it's a group of farm buildings. There's an old farmhouse and a group of barns attached to it, some of which have got permission to be converted to a dwelling, others are more modern sheds, but the whole scheme has been taken over by an enterprise that is seeing a new equestrian business being developed at this site, and some retention of farmland in the immediate area around it as well. It's quite a substantial series of applications and investment that's gone on the property. That shows the wider context. That's not what this application is about. That just shows the larger buildings that have been approved in the area. There's an indoor arena. There's an American barn, which we saw on site has been built. There's a horse walker that's been erected, and the outdoor arena is in place now. The whole area is to be landscaped. It's still quite raw at the moment, as you know, and this area of green space is to be put in, additional hedgerow planting to frame the development. So it's all going to be much softened by the proposed overall landscaping scheme, which is why we've included that. For those who were on site yesterday will understand that it looks a bit raw at the moment. So this proposal is to demolish two sheds, metal sheds that are in the group of farm buildings. So that's the farmhouse down in this corner here. It's obviously established as a dwelling, and it's going to be used as a dwelling by the people who run the new equestrian business here. They've relocated from Gloucestershire, so there's quite a bit of inward investment, if I can call it that, coming into the county as a result of this enterprise. There's also an older barn up here and adjoining buildings which to be converted to a dwelling. We've got permission for that. This is where the big sheds are, where this L-shaped building, workshop and storage building is going, if you like, to finish off or round off this part of the development in the old farm yard or farmstead in this area. There will be planting wrapping around the building here, with orchard trees planted here, and the access will come in to serve this little courtyard where the implement/workshop shed is being located. That's it in. So it'll be a garage, partly a garage for the business, the occupiers of the house, secure workshop and farm machinery store in that area. And that's what it'll look like. So much smaller and lower than the existing sheds that are there at the moment, metal sheds, which are to be removed. And it's of a scale that is more akin to the domestic property, the farmhouse and the barns, the smaller traditional barns that are there in that farmstead. It's going to be made up of high quality materials, so Welsh blue slates and horizontal timber boarding, to signify it as a secondary building in association with the farmhouse, and then the larger equestrian buildings to the north. That's it, the back of it, looking out from the courtyard. That's a view towards the house itself. And those are the sheds there on the left, the two metal sheds which are to be removed, and we were sort of standing in that area, and the back of that workshop building will face where those buildings are now. And that traditional barn is one of them buildings that has got permission to be converted to residential use. So it's a proposed workshop, part of the redevelopment of the wider site that includes renovation of the dwelling and traditional barns. The workshop is appropriate to its setting in terms of scale, design and form. It'll be softened by a landscaping scheme for the orchard, which wraps around the side of the workshop building. There'll be additional landscaping, as we saw in the overall landscape plan, to complement this and soften the larger, if you like, equestrian buildings that have got consent and some of which have been built. So that's it. We recommend approval for this development.
Okay, thank you, Phil. And again, Councillor Chandler was going to speak. Councillor Howells?
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Chandler, as we previously said, is unable to come today. They did ask me to bring to attention the White Castle's Community Council's members' concerns about the cumulative effect of many different planning applications for this site. And that's all really. Thanks.
Okay, thanks.
Sorry, could I just add to that? Sorry, in relation to White Castle Community Council's comments, the applications have been assessed in visual terms on the basis of the cumulative impact of there's 4 or 5 applications that have come in incrementally. And I think the agent explained yesterday, some of those applications have come in ad hoc, if you like, or seemingly ad hoc, on the basis that some of the land has been owned by different interested parties. So they've obviously been trying to assemble the land in order to make this enterprise work in a comprehensive manner, but it's taken time to achieve that, and that is why they've come in incrementally, if you like, those planning applications. But we have assessed it in the round, looking at all of those applications together.
Okay, thanks, Phil. Councillor McConnell.
I'd like to propose that we approve this application. The buildings that we saw aren't pretty, and the buildings that are proposed look really quite elegant by comparison. So it's quite a big development. But I think it's a very positive one. And looking at the other plans and talking through with the agent, the other plans, for the area, I see little to object about, frankly.
Thank you for that. Yes, it's big, but it's very high quality, isn't it? Or certainly what we saw on Monday. I've got nobody else registered asking to speak. Oh, Councillor Bryn.
I was just going to say I'm happy to second that if nobody else wants to.
Councillor Powell beat you to it. So we've got it proposed and seconded. So can we have the vote up, please? Thank you very much. Vote now, then, everybody.
Okay, so that one's approved, 13 for approval.
Thank you, Paige. So that's the end of the applications, but we've got some appealed decisions, which Phil's going to run us through.
There we go. So the first appeal was at a property called Bewley Barn. This is relatively isolated barn that's had a checkered planning history over the years, allowed to be extended from what was originally a small barn. So there's been talking of incremental applications as per the last one. This one certainly had the fair share of those. The applicant was not content with a lighting condition attached to a more recent planning permission and sought to remove that lighting condition, but the inspector agreed that there was still a valid reason as to why that lighting condition should allow it to be maintained and retained in terms of protected species and of course bats. It's close to the various important designations for bats in terms of the Wye Valley. So the inspector agreed that the application condition over lighting should be retained, so the appeal was not allowed. It means that the building can't actually be illuminated. It doesn't prevent any lights being put on the building, but it does prevent the actual elevations being illuminated. So any lights will have to be pushed away from the building to illuminate either the curtilage or downwards. So we were quite pleased with the outcome of that, and obviously our ecologists are as well. But we will have to think carefully about how we frame conditions of that type in the future to perhaps to make sure they're a bit more restrictive than the condition that was actually added in that instance, so that they're only, perhaps we agree a lighting scheme, full stop, and in consultation with ecologists, so that there's no free rein for them to put lights up but then have to point them down or anything, because that might not be the best location for them to actually light the building on it itself. So I hope I explained that. In other words, there's room for scope to improve our wording of our conditions on lighting in conjunction with our ecologists. So that was that one. So that was a good one. That's the building there. The second one was an interesting one. You'll all be familiar with this location. It's the bend at Hardwick Hill. So you've got Ashford House and the road to Bulwark here. Sorry, let's go back. That's Lower Hardwick. And then we've had a few applications up here for HMOs and the like that we've been on site visits to. So that's the road to Bulwark, where it meets the A48 as it swings round and then goes down towards the town centre. So there was a proposal for an access improvement here, or widening of an access, and a plot going in this area. There was no objection to the design of the building, because it was quite well designed, but there was an objection from Welsh Government Trunk Roads people about the access onto the A48 there. The inspectors actually allowed the appeal and allowed the access, and much emphasis has been put on the reduction to 20 miles an hour and the need for lower visibility splays, and they can meet those from that access. It's actually on the outside of the bend, which kind of helps it there. There we are. If it had been 30 along there, we don't know whether that would have been the same decision, but because it's been reduced to 20, traffic speeds are lower and the visibility requirement is lower as well. So the actual design of the property is quite an interesting one, and if it does get built, we can certainly go and have a look at it on one of our design tours. It's designed by one of the local architects in Chepstow who's won awards, so be an interesting one to look at. And that's the access on the left there as you come in. So that's Hardwick, Lower Hardwick, I think the property there which is listed. There's another listed property here, Ashfield, is it? Ashfield House, I think. And then the road to Bulwark's here where that van is waiting. So it gets very busy. Yeah, whether you or I would want to live in that plot is another thing, but I'm sure somebody will enjoy lovely views over the river if it does get built.
I wouldn't want to pull out of a drive there. It's really hard to pull out of that turning.
Well, yeah.
That's why we refuse.
20 miles an hour or no. Maybe they'll cycle. They'll be all right then.
I think we looked at that before the 20 mile an hour came in, didn't we?
Yeah, it was free.
Yeah, so the inspectors sort of taken current situation.
Yeah, circumstances have changed, yeah. The next one is Rose Cottage. Somebody had formed an access without permission from a field which is above the lane there, and has caused, we were obviously drawn to its attention because it was unauthorised and it was causing runoff onto the road. So so that access is actually here. You can see that sort of disturbed area there, and that's what it originally looked like. And there's a ditch either side in here where the runoff from the field would go, but because they formed the access here, it actually interrupted the flow of water from the field, and it led to pooling and flooding on the actual, or contributed to pooling and flooding on the access there, the highway, and the inspector looked at all other aspects and didn't find anything in terms of intrinsic harm, in terms of visual quality, but did find that flooding hadn't been demonstrated that the scheme would not lead to additional flooding. So the enforcement notice was upheld, and they're going to have to remove the work that they've done. So we do take enforcement action. Good question. I don't know the answer to that, Councillor Eason. I haven't got the detail of that. But, yeah. I don't know, the notice may ask them to do that, I don't know. And then, where are we? Oh, this is the last one that Councillor McKenna would have been involved in or had some interest in. It's on the edge of Catbrook, and it was originally a farm storage building. Consent was granted some years ago for the smaller of these two buildings to be a, if you like, a micro distillery, making gin and other spirits, and it was supported by the council in that very micro level, that micro scale. It's probably a product of its own success, and it started growing, and it moved all the bottling and packaging into the big barn, freeing up the space in the smaller barn for then hospitality, groups to be invited to watch the distilling process and sampling the product. And that did lead to a lot more traffic being generated and led to a lot of complaints from neighbours about disturbance, parking on the verges, noise, that sort of thing. So we tried to work with the business to try and get them to either relocate or resort back to their micro level. Unfortunately, they also put additional hard surfaces in to expand the car park to accommodate the increase in intensity of the use. This is at AOMB as well, by the way, so it's a higher bar really in terms of impact on the landscape and the scenic nature of the area. So we tried to work with them, but unfortunately we couldn't come to an agreement, so we reluctantly took enforcement action, bearing in mind it was a local business. The upshot is that the Section 78 appeal, which is in effect the appeal against the refusal of planning permission, was dismissed. So the council won the case for a lot of different arguments: noise, activity, impact on the AOMB, the impact that they'd have to put this big screen, acoustic screen up, which would be unsightly, the increase in the parking area, which was unsightly, all sorts of things. The inspector found in the council's favour. They also upheld the enforcement notice. So what we've said is that they need to revert back to the small building, and they can carry on, but at a lower scale, smaller scale. So we're not saying no to the business. They just need to, try and resort back to what they've got approval for, if you like. We don't know what the company are going to do now, whether they're going to stay here or relocate. They have been working with our economic development team, but they haven't so far managed to find another premises in the area. So we'll have to watch this space, really. The notice was varied, and they've had a bit more time to actually comply with the notice. So instead of 3 months, bearing in mind this has been going on for a long time now, this case, instead of 3 months, it'll be 6 months from the notice. So they'll have until June approximately to comply with the notice. So it's an unfortunate one, and it's not one we've enjoyed dealing with, but it's a necessary option that we had to take, bearing in mind that the residents were quite upset, and the amenity was impacted by the activity and the scale of the business in what is a very rural setting there. So that's it.
It's a bit like the 1800s in America, gin houses.
Yeah.
It's a bit like the 1800s in America with the gin houses.
Yeah, okay, thank you, Phil. So that concludes business today. So thank you very much, everybody, and we'll see you next time.
Just a reminder, we've got enforcement training.
Oh yes, enforcement training on the 29th